Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom Grossi. And, oh boy, well, the Packers don't play this weekend, so I don't have to talk to a opponent from the opposing team, which is nice. And so we decided to go from within. Absolutely. And not only did we go within, we went deep. We went real deep. And with that, I introduced my guest, the co-founder of Cheesehead TV, the best-selling author of How Cheese Changed My Life and Could Change Yours Too, Mr. Aaron Nagler.
Tom Grossi, how the hell are you?
I am so good. I am so good, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. How's everybody doing? How's Corey doing? How's everyone?
Everyone's good.
Excellent.
Corey is excellent. We're doing transplants later today. As you know, we're recording this, Thursday afternoon. We're doing transplants at 5 later this afternoon, and I'm pretty pumped for it.
Abso-frickin'-frackin'-lutely. So as soon as the peoples are done listening to this, they can rock, skip, and jump on over to Cheesehead TV, and they can get entertained for hours on end. Hours on it. Hours.
No doubt.
Absolutely. And so I want to thank you for coming on, bud, especially, because we have we actually have the first week of the playoffs off in a good way, not how it has been for the past 2 years where we had the entire postseason off, but we actually have like a nice bye week. So this is nice that we can actually relax for a weekend.
Yeah, and wasn't that crazy though? These last couple of years with the Packers not in the playoffs, like you got so used to it, it became just January meant the Packers were in the playoffs. And then to have it taken away the last 2 years, I got to tell you, yes, it was hard. It was hard.
It was bad.
But they're back. They're back.
They are. And it was one of those things that when they weren't in the postseason, there's this is going to sound bad. There was a tiny bit of relief because I'm like, wow, my liver gets a break for a month. It's going to be okay. I don't have to worry about my blood pressure or the anxiety. But at the same time, there's you miss it, right? You're just man, I need to feel alive. And when the Packers are not there, going into overtime against the Cardinals, and losing on the first drive, there's something missing in my life. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm glad we got there. But
that's the thing. It's been the last two Januaries have been just alien after 13 years of playoff bound teams, contending teams, and all of a sudden have it snatched away. Yeah. But now they've had a nice reset. Now we got Lafleur in town, and I think these are going to become pretty regular trips.
That's what I'm hoping for. And by the way, us complaining about not being in the playoffs for 2 years, every single Lions fan just turned this interview off just now. It just happened where they're like, oh, they're complaining about not seeing the playoffs for 2 years. Okay, bye-bye now. That's when they signed on off. So welcome, Packer fans. I appreciate it. And so you mentioned Matt Lafleur, the sexiest head coach in the NFL currently. I don't think there's much of a debate there. He has come in and reinvigorated this team. There is a youthful energy that is in the locker room. There was this talking about a culture shift that needed to occur. Mike McCarthy tended to disagree in his latest interview, but you can definitely see a shift, not obviously only in our winning ways, but more of just how the guys are around in the locker room and how they're interacting with one another and kind of just what you see on the field. And I'm curious to kind of get your take on it when he was initially hired coming over from Tennessee and kind of where we are now, and obviously you're a little bit more up close and personal, kind of where have you seen the biggest shifts in this team thus far, and how would you evaluate LaFleur's job?
Well, it's interesting because this summer obviously was the first time we got to go through a camp with LaFleur in charge after years of McCarthy setting the schedule and how the vibe around the team, like you said. And I got to admit, I was pretty dubious this summer. He came in and they had very light work on the field when it came to camp. The music playing, guys dancing around, lots of pre-snap penalties. And I thought, oh boy. And, his mantra kept, everything he would repeat to us at the time was, we're getting the work done that we need to get done. And just, keeping them out there longer doesn't mean anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. And I thought, okay, well, that's how he wants to run his team. It's his gig, obviously. And hey, you cannot do anything but look at the results and say, okay, Matt Lafleur knows what the hell he's talking about. Because, I mean, this is the healthiest this team has been in forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's now, undoubtedly, injury luck is a real thing. You got to think year to year that they're going to, regress back to the mean a little bit. But there's no doubt that this team is fresh. There's no doubt that Lafleur knows the buttons he has to press for the most part. And you couple that with it sure does feel, like you mentioned, fresh, updated, whatever word you want to use, but the guys are loose in the locker room. It's a great vibe, a great feeling every time you're in there. And it's always on the outside looking in, so you're always kind of guessing, but it sure feels like the bond that maybe had frayed a little bit the last couple of years under McCarthy is definitely tied back together. And, you heard Rodgers mention it in that interview with Bon Iver a couple weeks ago for GQ, where he said, it's not the most talented team I've ever played on,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something special. There's something special about it. And look, now they're in the dance. Once you get in the playoffs, literally anything can happen.
Mm-hmm. Well,
do I think the Packers are going to march to the Super Bowl? Probably not, but there's a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like, every single person who is coming out, and there's lots of them who are saying like, oh my God, this team is one and done. Like, this team is going to get knocked over by the Saints or what have you. It's like, listen, it literally doesn't matter a single thing that has happened in the regular season. It doesn't matter. Like, we're at this point where the Tennessee Titans can go and get into the Super Bowl. It could happen. Is it likely? No. 100%. But like we're at this point where there are 12 teams left playing football. 2 of those teams are going to be in the Super Bowl. Why not us? And I think that,
I mean, it's literally 2 wins. They're 2 wins away.
Correct.
There's a team that's played 16 games, won 13 of them, 2 more, and they're in.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And yet still people are like, well, I'm just not like, I feel like if we win the Super Bowl, there's still going to people be like, yeah, this team really wasn't great though. Like
worst
they weren't
Super Bowl champion ever. It's totally coming. It is.
It is. And what's funny is like, I've been kind of wrestling with this a little bit of seeing like this tremendous shift, right? And just talking about wins and losses. Now, I'm curious of what your take on it is. Do you equate the success that we are finding on the field, and I'm just talking about in matters of wins or losses, not if they're pretty or not when we're winning, because they're not. But when you're looking at that, do you give more kind of like stock in the players that we've added to the team, or is it more to the personnel that we have added surrounding the team? Because we're talking about these culture shifts, but obviously we've got guys like Zadarius Smith and Amos and Preston Smith and even Billy Turner, like obviously who have bolstered this team tremendously. But on top of that, like, do you think that if Matt Lafleur came in last year with last year's team, that he would have similar results? Or do you think that it's kind of like this perfect storm? Or do you think more of it's just the players that we've added to the team?
I think the players are probably the majority of it, but I do think Lafleur has set up a really solid program. It's a good start for a young coach. Mm-hmm. But, you mentioned Zadarius. I mean, he's pretty much single-handedly come in and shifted
100%
the mentality on defense, at least, And look, to me, it's all about Brian Gutekunst and the job he did this past offseason. We're clearly looking at a team that had been propped up and relying almost solely on Aaron Rodgers for so long. Mm-hmm. They've gone on some nice runs. The defense has been up and down, mostly down under Capers, etc. But Aaron Rodgers was your one kind of stalwart. You could count on him no matter what. Obviously, the 2016 run is probably the last time he put that team on his back during those run the table kind of escapades, And look, it was a lot of fun. I had a ball watching those teams. But what I love about what Gutekunst did this offseason was clearly all about, look, we have got to have other ways of winning. It can't just be Aaron Rodgers throws it around the yard for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns each and every week. Because if you have to rely on that, especially for an aging quarterback who's been injured a couple times in the last few years, the chances are you're going to be disappointed. So I think all of that acquisition, whether it was through free agency, using draft capital, however he got those players in there, it was clearly all about, look, we're finally going to feel the defense. We're finally going to have a running game. And clearly that's part of the Lafleur thing, not just the personnel, but this is, the whole offense is supposedly predicated around the zone run scheme, etc. Mm-hmm. We're going to take pressure off of Aaron Rodgers. We're going to make sure that he doesn't have to carry the load. And look at how they're winning. I mean, I think that formula has been working because you watch it. Everyone who's listening has watched it. They haven't been incredibly efficient on offense. Aaron Rodgers has been less than Superman-like, but they're still winning football games. And that was the plan. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and I think I brought this up 2 years ago, and the idea of you saw the Vikings and the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and they were on their backup quarterbacks. You could never, ever say the same thing since Matt Flynn. When we had him and he went on his run, when in 2013 when Rodgers was hurt, you knew as soon as Brett Hundley got on that field, you're like, well, okay, you believed, you were like, okay, maybe
you wanted it. You wanted him to turn it on. Yep.
This could go well.
This was the week. This was the week he was going to turn the corner.
And it never happened. But I mean, you look at it from that standpoint of like you said, you don't need Aaron Rodgers to be quote unquote Aaron Rodgers every single week. Now, you look at this past Sunday's game and sometimes throughout this season where you see whether there's missed throws, miscommunications, or what have you. And I would say that, yeah, there are more of those, right? Or at least they're more apparent when they're starting to pop up. But that being said, at the end of the day, I don't care how you win. We're 13-3 and we have a first round bye. So while I understand the concerns about Aaron Rodgers and him aging and what have you, I completely understand that. Completely. And those concerns are warranted. At the end of the day, you got to take it one game, one season at a time. And right now, we're in pretty good shape.
I totally agree. And the thing with Rodgers, too, is, look, these last two games have not been pretty for him. The game in Minnesota, the game in Detroit, both of those games, I thought he was pretty... He's missing throws you're not used to seeing him miss. Mm-hmm. And even some of the stuff he's completing is off target.
Yeah.
And obviously that's concerning, but like you said, that's an off-season concern. I wouldn't doubt for a second if Brian Gutekunst ended up drafting a quarterback this year early on. But right now, in this season, and with Aaron Rodgers as your guy, even with all those misses, and there were a lot these last two games, he still makes 2 or 3 plays a game to help you win football games. Yeah. And the perfect example of that is the the post corner route that Devontae ran for a touchdown, where they saw how Detroit was playing them. Rodgers and Devontae got together on the sideline and said, actually Devontae came to Aaron and said, look, this is open. I can do this and, pretty much walk into the end zone. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. Whether it's that, whether it's, some of the throws he makes, like the play he makes to Aaron Jones on the screen pass that basically set up the winning field goal. That's an insane play. That's an insane throw into a window that has and off a sideways platform with his arm, blah blah blah. Has no business completing that, making that throw, but he does because he's Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. So if he makes 2 or 3 of those plays a game, and that's what he's done, that resulted either in touchdowns or good field position for field goals, etc. Yeah, that's all they need. They don't need him to go ham.
Yeah.
Now, it'd be great if he did. I'd love it. But they don't need it, and that's the whole point of this season.
Yeah, and I think that this leads to a conversation that I know you have had all season with fans.
I know
and
where
we're like,
going.
Oh, it's coming right there. It's going right there. Because Aaron Rodgers' numbers this year are very similar to what they were last year. They're nearly identical. Obviously, he's taken far less sacks, which is great. The O-line has been healthy. Again, you mentioned that earlier, which has been a godsend. It's been phenomenal. But you look at, okay, is this an aging quarterback or potentially not having to, make him do as much, like we were just talking about? Or the question that I get every single week, and as do you, do we need a wide receiver? Come on. How many questions did you get about Antonio Brown, AJ Green, Emmanuel Sanders? Bringing back Randall Cobb has gotten really popular in the comments section and the DMs of lately.
Yep, this offseason. Randall's making a return.
Hey, listen, there's still people who are DMing me about Jordy. It's still happening.
I know. Yeah, I get those emails too. Probably the same people. But look, what I love is that whenever MVS has a drop, right?
Yes.
Or Geronimo Allison fumbles, or take any negative play in and of itself. Every single time, and that's not an exaggeration, every single time something like that happens, I get 2 or 3 tweets, maybe an email, maybe a DM. Oh, see, Nagler, guess we didn't need any wide receivers.
Yeah.
Which, I'm tired. I'm so tired from this.
Yeah, you mean like
here.
I literally like for a week I did a span of 3 videos in a row on all 3 receivers. Like, should we draft it? The answer was no every single time. Like it was no. Like the answer, Emmanuel Sanders. Well, I was like, maybe we get him for like super cheap here to be a cool weapon. But like for us to go out and like people are still talking about Antonio Brown. I'm like, no,
it blows my
just
mind.
stop.
It blows my mind.
Just no more. And like, here's the thing. You mentioned that Gutekunst might draft a QB. I would not be surprised if we spent a little bit of a higher pick on a wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised.
100%.
Because, again, of like developing that kind of guy. And thankfully, Lazard has kind of like come up and really, really stepped up into a number 2 role, which has just been absent. That was made for guys like MVS, which was made for guys like Geronimo Allison, who I thought was going to have a great year. Did not, and there's also people who still forget that we have EQ sitting on the sideline right now, and who knows what he's going to look like when we come back. And I think when we were looking at what this team needs, like wide receiver, I would say maybe it's like top 5 at this point, but we need inside linebackers. We need offensive line depth. We need to, make sure that we're all set on tight end and maybe, potentially cut some people. But there's other drastic needs on this team. But like, if you look at it, again, we're not winning pretty, but we're still winning football games with these guys who are undrafted practice squad, kind of like random guys that like the Patriots usually assemble, and we're still winning. So yes, it would be wonderful to have a number 2, but we have a very, very solid number 1 in Davante Adams, who's a phenomenal football player. And people are talking about bringing in guys like freaking OBJ or Antonio Brown. I'm like, then who's number 1? Because the cap can't survive with those 2 guys, because we had that with Jordy and we had that with Randall Cobb. And listen, it was really nice. We all want to go back to that time, and it was lovely, even though our defense sucked. But like, they cost like $11 and $10 million each, and that's just not sustainable. And at some point, you have to move on and look at the future. And so that's what we kind of need to do with wide receivers right now. We need to get young talent and build them up.
That's the thing. And look, I'm all for working on the wide receiver group this offseason. Like, I think that will absolutely happen. There's zero doubt about it. My pushback this year has always been they have the talent necessary to win football games. And I would much rather have those young guys, those undrafted guys you're talking about, have a chance to step up and develop, a la Allen Lazard. If you go make a trade, who's to say that Lazard ever becomes what we're seeing him become now, because he's gotten lots of playing time, And look, don't get it twisted. The Packers did try to make a move. They made the call on Robbie Anderson with the Jets. They actually thought they had a deal with the Jets until it fell apart at the last second. So it's not like Gutekunst just sat on his hands and didn't make a call. But I'm kind of glad. I'm kind of glad that didn't go through, because it just proves what I've been saying all freaking season was right. Like, they have the talent to win. They played 16 games. They've won 13 of them. Yeah. Like, would another receiver help? Yeah, of course, probably, but there's no guarantee. Look at the Patriots. They spent a second-round pick on Mohamed Sanu, and their offense didn't get any better.
Nope.
And everyone talks about Emmanuel Sanders, and look, I get the fascination. I get why people were enamored with that idea. But San Francisco went and got him, like you're saying, to be their number 1. I know they have a young, promising rookie, but he's still a rookie. They have a second-year guy in Pettis, etc. They needed a lead dog, so they went and got a lead dog. The Packers have a lead dog. His name is Davante Adams. So why would you, like, that always kind of just blows my mind that people, maybe it's the fantasy football thing, people are so kind of into that, so they always want to play GM and throw draft capital around like it's nothing. But to me, especially heading into 2020 with one of the deepest wide receiving classes we have seen in years, I'd much rather hold on to those draft picks and get our own guys. Yeah. That's just it.
And the argument that I always get that pushes back against that, well, when you draft somebody, you never know. Right? Like it's an unknown.
Yeah,
but it's the same exact thing with free agency. Like, it's the exact same thing. Like, you look at Sanu, who like in Atlanta, you know, wasn't getting all the reps as he usually was because of guys like Julio Jones or what have you. But you know, he was a consistent guy and like constantly getting that stuff. And now N'Keal Harry is like overtaking him over in New England. So like it's one of those things
and they flushed away a second round pick for that.
Yes.
For that, you know,
yes.
that honor.
And like, you know, Sanu's not nothing against Sanu, but like he is not getting younger. You know, he's getting up there. And so like you look at kind of what the mentality is of like free agency versus draft, and this goes beyond wide receiver. This was something that was obviously talked about every single day under Ted Thompson about like going out and getting these guys. But like, listen, Gutekunst, like it worked. This year with free agency, it worked. And it worked amazingly. Getting Zadarius Smith, getting Preston Smith, it was great.
I love that what he did that I love, and I'm sure you've talked about this at some point this year, if not last spring, is he went and got guys who were coming off their first contracts, right? Up and coming guys about to enter their prime.
Yes.
And boy, did he get out of the park. Yes. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. He didn't go get aging veterans. He didn't get a end of the line Jimmy Graham, which, you know, that experiment's probably going to end this offseason.
I would think so, yeah.
Let's hope. But yeah, he got guys on the come up, so to speak. And I think he nailed every single one of them. And that's very rare in free agency. It's very, very rare. Lots of buyer's remorse out there, but I think he got it right.
Well, I remember a few years ago, I don't remember his first name, Bird. I think he was cornerback, safety, one or the other, that New Orleans wound up signing.
Jarius Bird.
Jarius Bird, yes. I remember the fanaticism that was over in the Green Bay fandom that was like, oh my God, we need to get this guy. He will make our backfield so good. And I remember him going to New Orleans and then throwing a crap ton of money at him. And he was straight up garbage.
And it was off. He was awful. It was one of the worst pickups of that offseason. And he helped wreck their cap.
Yes.
That was the other thing. Like they completely broke the bank for the guy, and he was totally garbage. New Orleans.
And it's one of those, it's one of those things too. Is like I see a ton of similarities between New Orleans and Green Bay, right? And that they have a great quarterback who is getting older, right? They have a Michael Thomas, if you're making the comparison to Devontae Adams, and that the defense has never been like the focal point. But again, like for 2 years, they sucked. It was really bad. And then they built themselves up.
They went 7-9.
Right. It was 3 years.
7-9, 3 years in a row. Something Mike McCarthy never did.
Ooh, that is true. Big facts right here. Big facts. and that's the thing. Like, you know, and they rebounded and we rebounded and there you go. Like sometimes it takes years and years and years and years and years. And one of the things is when you get into that desperation, I need to win right now kind of mentality, that's when you make really stupid decisions. And that's when, you know, you find yourself in cap hell and you can't get yourself out. And if you thought that 2 or 3 years of not being playoff contenders were bad, well, sorry, this is going to hurt a whole lot more.
Try living through the 70s and 80s. I mean, 2 years is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully I wasn't alive, so.
the return to that era is undoubtedly coming because the NFL is cyclical. But for now, I'm just happy they found a coach and seem to have got a great GM, and hopefully they find a quarterback and they can keep winning. That's down the road.
I completely agree. And so kind of like moving into the postseason where the Packers are, it's most likely, if we're playing the cards right, that we'll be playing against New Orleans a week from Sunday. Most likely. Again, anything could happen.
Most likely.
But it looks like we're most likely going to play New Orleans. So with that being said, the most likely playoff path would be play New Orleans at home, then most likely going on the road against San Francisco if we win that. And those are the two teams that we're going to have to most likely contend with, unless Seattle makes a shocker and beats San Francisco, which I would be totally okay with. Give me some retribution for 2014. It would warm my soul. But
in Lambeau Field.
Yeah, in Lambeau Field. Yes, inject it straight into my veins. And when you're looking at that, and not to, you know, I don't like the fans of like, oh, we're going to lose in the first one. Like, we're going to lose against New Orleans. We're going to get blown. Then don't watch. Like, stop watching football. Because, like, at that point, who cares? Like, what enjoyment are you getting out of this?
What is the point of hating your own team? I never understand that. Ever.
I think it's so you could be like, well, I told you. I was right. I told you.
Corey and I talk about this all the time on the show. This idea that the internet has kind of ruined fandom in some ways because of that exact aspect. This idea of I'm the first one to put it out there. I told you their wide receivers were going to suck. They proceed to win 13 games. Well, they won in spite of their wide receivers, just like I said. Like, everybody's got to be right, be first, be able to say, I told you so, rather than root for their team. That's what blows my mind. That's what absolutely blows my mind. Rather than root for their team to do well, they are rooting for their tweet to be right. That just, it kills. It absolutely murders.
Yes, snaps.
I am
snaps
dead. I am deceased.
Yes.
I am in the ground. I am buried.
So, with that being said, explain to me why the Packers are going to the Super Bowl. No, what do you think? Like, so, obviously, if we wind up playing New Orleans, the fact that it's on Sunday night at 6:40, like, I'm all with it.
I'm all in.
It's going to be cold.
Get Drew Brees out. Get Drew Brees out in the cold. Although it's not, the first initial forecasts don't have it like bone-chilling cold, but it will be cold.
Yeah.
Hell of a lot colder than the Superdome, I'll tell you that.
That is very true.
I love it. I love the idea. I'm marinating it. I love the idea of New Orleans coming up to Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
I love it. In the cold, in January. Now, look, that's not the ball game, right? It's not just add cold and win. I get that. But let me tell you, I like Green Bay's chances against anybody in Lambeau. Now, going out to San Francisco, it might be a different scenario. That's a totally different conversation. But in Lambeau Field, they can beat anybody. I don't care who it is. You roll up the 85 Bears. I don't care. They could beat them. It would have. Well, especially if the guys came today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that we got this. Then they're done.
Totally.
So
Tim McMahon with a walker. We got you, buddy.
We got this. So because obviously I think they can definitely take them down. And I think that it's a good matchup being in Lambeau. But I mean, it's true too that I thought for years, and this was young Aaron Rodgers. You go back to the 2010 season, when we would go to the Super Bowl and what have you. There was a part of me for a while, and maybe you'll agree with me here, that I thought that Aaron Rodgers was actually worse at home because he was putting up ridiculous numbers in domes, and that it was a hostile environment, right? The fan base, the crowd wasn't there, but he just was doing better in average temperatures, or at least normal temperature. But I think one of the biggest differences this year is I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but we have a bit of a home field advantage that's not just the weather anymore, because I feel while you may say that players got complacent, I feel the fan base got a little complacent as well, the ones that were sitting in the stands.
Tom Grossi, you have never told a lie. I could not agree more. And I think that's a big part of what Lafleur really latched onto when he first arrived, and I think it was smart to do so. They were top to bottom about the entire stadium experience, whether it is telling fans to get loud, whether it's the video board stuff, whether, the whole environment around game day has changed in Lambeau Field. I was talking about this on Twitter the other day. I know the running joke is always, you go there and old people tell you to sit down, etc. Yeah. And of course, some of that still exists. That's never going away. That's just Green Bay.
Sure.
But I'll tell you what, on game day, holy cow, Lambeau is back. Because you're right, it had gotten complacent. People were just kind of there. It was a see and be seen. The game almost felt perfunctory or secondary to why people were even gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And now it is on. Lambeau is a decided home field advantage now. Kind of the way it was those early Holmgren years when they were in the playoffs and Lambeau was just insane. It's as crazy as those years. And it's the first time in a long time I can remember feeling like that. It's loud as hell on third down. Great vibe around the stadium. Hell, pregame all the way 3 or 4 hours before the game, people are out there getting jabbed up. So, yeah, I love it. Lambeau is absolutely back.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I remember the 2014 run, and because I was at the no catch game with my dad,
right?
And I those were also the years where you had Seattle had established their reputation of that's a home field advantage, the 12th man, right. That they really were into that, and I have the towel on my wall that's get loud Lambeau, and that was kind of yeah, you could do that, and listen, the game was great and it was a lot of fun, and there was people that were cheering and all that stuff, but there was definitely a Okay, yeah, no, like we all know, like this is not like a real, like it's the weather. It's not necessarily the fans.
Yeah. And they would put up the soundometer or whatever it is, and it's like this really lame attempt to be like Kansas City or Seattle, and it was like, yeah, we've got 80-year-old blue-hair grandmas like sitting on their hands, like no one's getting out here.
No, they're just like, I would stand, but you know, just not right now.
Yeah, but this is not the time or place. Actually, it is the exact time or place.
Exactly.
But like I said, man, they've turned that around 100%.
I love it, and I think that will make for a hell of a matchup come a week from Sunday. Whoever we play against, that will be
no doubt.
That'll be definitely a good time. But Mr. Nagler, I want to thank you so much for gracing me with your presence on Packcast. It has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that we can get together soon. As the other DMs besides wide receivers that I constantly get is another Madden challenge. It's always lingering. You know who I feel? Here's a fan shout out: Uncultured Barbarian. Every single
he's
time,
our number one fan.
all the time.
Number one.
He's always like, he'll go on Transplants. He'll give a super chat asking about Madden, and then he'll go on my Twitter and be like, "Hey, so Grossi, like, when's it gonna happen?" And he's like, "Nagler just called you a bitch." I'm like, "I watched the whole show and he didn't. Like, he didn't say that. It did never happen."
He is the Don King of our Madden matchup. No doubt about it. He's trying to facilitate. No doubt about it. But listen, hey, the studio's here. You know where it is. I'm always ready to go. Can you do me a favor?
Show up this time?
Just practice.
Yeah.
Practice. Just do some. Would you practice before you come?
It's just
before you arrive at the studio.
You know, it's just I'm really busy, you know, with all these subscribers. It's like really tough to manage all of them. Yeah. And so
I know it is. I know it's hard.
You know, it's not easy. But speaking of community service, so I want you to plug your channel. And so, Mr. Nagler, where can everybody go and really grant a wish here? Where can they find everything that you do to really make someone's dreams come true?
Well, they got to go to Cheesehead TV, either .com or the YouTube channel or the Facebook page or the Instagram account, or find me on Twitter at Aaron Nagler. But, you know, we do tons of content each and every day. The YouTube channel is about ready to take off and explode. We got some fun stuff coming up, not only this week, but moving into the off season. And like I said, Facebook, Insta, we're everywhere. Cheesehead TV, we're devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
So go and check out Cheesehead TV. They're all Packers all the time. Just don't forget where you came from. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out Packcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon members over at Patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. Oh, and we'll be streaming every single playoff game this weekend, next weekend. We're doing it, baby. I'm Tom freaking Frackin' Grossi. And as always, go Pack, go.